Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with two very special guests. Our first guest today is Dr. Rick Hanson, and he's here to share with us his new book, Neurodharma, New Science, Ancient Wisdom, and 7 Practices of the Highest Happiness. Now, Dr. Hanson is a psychologist, Senior Fellow of UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center, and a New York Times bestselling author. His books have been published in 29 languages, including Neurodharma, Resilience, Hardwiring Happiness, Buddha's Brain, Just One Thing, and Mother Nurture, with 900,000 copies in English alone. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Rick Hanson.
Marianne, thank you.
Oh my goodness, what a joy it is to have you here and to talk about this new book. I was so excited to get a copy. I mean, I'm sure you're having a lot of people tell you that right now because it's making some really impactful changes.
I really appreciate that. If I could just kind of talk about the book just for a second here. I think it's amazing to bring together both the wisdom of the ages, the people who've really developed themselves, who've acquired the greatest inner strength, inner peace, unshakable love, deep wisdom, learn from their example, turbocharged by the findings of recent brain science. And when you put those two together, sparks start to fly, and you have so many practical things you can do in everyday life amidst the madness, while also helping yourself take your own steps each day of self-actualization, personal development, inner healing, and even awakening along the way. Like, that's so great. I just love it.
Well,
I know I sound like a total dork. I mean, I'm an older guy, but I'm just completely enthusiastic about this material. It just seems like the neatest stuff.
Oh, I'm right behind you on that, So if there's a line for people like that, I'm in it, So,
Well, we're in the line together.
We are in the line together. But I think it's so exciting what science is teaching us about the brain right now and how we can use that to really kind of move the needle forward and having a better experience here.
It's really true. People, you sort of know it abstractly that, okay, what I'm thinking and what I'm hearing and what I'm remembering and wanting, it's all being kind of sort of made by my body and brain. But then we just forget all about it, except the implications are huge. And what the book's about and my work in general is helping people, in effect, light up particular circuits or get particular things to happen inside their brain. And in stimulating them, we strengthen them. So in effect, you can use your mind to change your brain, to change your mind for the better. You can take charge of the brain change process from the inside out rather than, in effect, letting yourself be pushed around by external forces, media, other people, worries, long shadow cast by your own childhood, etc. You can find an inner power and an inner freedom in how you help yourself each day authentically to become a little happier, a little calmer, a little more forgiving. I could say this from my long marriage, a little less of a jerk every day. And that's good because it accumulates over time.
Well, I think that's such an important place to come from because how often are we kind of just like that bobble in the ocean, just the waves are throwing us around without really any course in regards to how we're designing our own destiny. And when we look at that, I think this book is really a game changer in being able to actually start being the captain of your own ship.
Well, that's so well said. I should have talked to you more about, when I was writing the book. People don't really, I think, appreciate, most people, number one, how the brain is really vulnerable to going negative. That's its negativity bias, makes it like Velcro for bad experiences, but Teflon for good ones. That's Mother Nature's plan. Thanks, Mom. It really worked great in the Stone Age, maybe even back in Jurassic Park. But today it creates a lot of needless suffering and conflict, on the one hand. On the other hand, we have this power to actually build new structure in our brain, to form new connections, to increase blood flow to busy regions, to affect the expression of genes, to impact the several 100 trillion little microprocessors, all the synaptic connections in the network of the brain that are sparkling away. We have the power to do that, and much research now shows that when people do simple practices like gratitude, letting go of worries, developing self-compassion, cultivating kindness for others, even if you disagree with them, mindfulness development, resilience training. These actually physically change the brain. And scientists are now observing the actual physical changes that underlie the psychological changes that people experience over time as they do those practices, which is really motivating and hopeful.
I think so too. I mean, you hear that, and you're like, gosh, there's a lot of change that can happen here. So, why don't we? There's a few questions I have because there's so much great information in this book.
Mm-hmm.
I think I want to kind of touch on some of the points that maybe some people who are new to your work may ask. So,
Sure.
is this book about Buddhism?
That's a great question. So, it draws on the Buddha's teachings about the mind that are not religious. They're completely practical and psychological. For example, he points out that we have a tendency to fight with what's painful and unpleasant, which makes it hang around. We also have a tendency to chase after what's pleasurable and try to possess it for ourselves, which tends to lead us into sort of endless loops of striving, straining, stressing, and craving. Right? That's very psychological. So I took his roadmap, his penetrating model of the mind, and then mapped it to the latest brain science and turned that into 7 simple practices people can do every day. And in the process of these sort of 7 themes, which I'll name in a second, you can really develop yourself in these ways. So I'm kind of reverse engineering backwards. I'm going backwards from people who we would just all agree, whatever your tradition is around the world, are exemplary people, saintly, wise, wonderful people. How do they do it, right? So I'm the kind of guy who asks, yo, what's going on in that brain? What's happening under the hood that they can just sustain? Pick your person. Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama, Nelson Mandela. How do they do it, right? In the face of the greatest challenges, as well as so many people we've never heard about. And yet everyone who knows them knows, wow, they've got some, as my son, a sports guy, would say, they've got some serious game. All right, how do they do that, right? And it's just incredibly useful to do that. So I would just say, the book, it respects the Buddhist tradition, which has had the greatest sort of intersection with science and research in the last 10 years, because it, like science, is empirical. It's not based on faith. It doesn't claim any kind of superpowers for the Buddha or any, I'm myself a transcendentalist. I actually explore that dimension at the end of the book, by which I mean I think there's more to everything than simply just the ordinary Big Bang universe. There's more going on mysteriously, something or other than that. And if people just want to stay inside the natural frame, so-called, of ordinary reality, I'm okay with that. On the other hand, I think all the great teachers just about have said that there's more going on than meets the eye, and it's useful to open to that and take it into account and turn toward it. And then people turn toward that in different ways, including in traditional religious ways or just simply having a spiritual sense about them. So that's sort of the approach I took in the book, one that's welcoming of people who are secular, strict atheists even, while also being very welcoming to people who are Christian, who belong to other faith traditions as well, to use the 7 practices in their own path, right? To develop qualities, I'll name them now, of steadiness of mind, which we all need, warmth of heart, compassion, kindness. 3rd, emotional balance, equanimity. I call it poetically resting in fullness, a sense of contentment and enoughness already. Those are the first 3. Then in the second 3, feeling whole and complete as you are. Doesn't it feel peaceful to just imagine feeling that way? Like, okay, there's nothing wrong with you. Yeah, you've got to manage yourself, but you're okay. You don't need to be so divided internally. You can rest more in a sense of being rather than being swept into doing all the time. Then 5th, I call it receiving nowness, really being in the present. It's so great because much research shows that when people drop into the present, they suffer a lot less and they get much more effective. Right? That's 2 out of 2 right there. While I call it opening into allness, having a growing feeling of what you know is true, which is that we're connected to everything. And then last, finding timelessness, which does speak to the question of what is ultimate, has a fundamental stillness, spaciousness, and stability in which we can take our ultimate refuge, because unlike ordinary experiences and conditions, the ultimate is not changing all the time. Right? So those are the seven, and anyone in any tradition or no tradition at all can appreciate that steadiness, lovingness, fullness, wholeness, nowness, allness, and timelessness are pretty good to develop.
Well, and it's not something that is unobtainable, which I think is good for people to hear. It's something you can strive for. Maybe
Yeah,
one area you need to work on, as opposed to, getting all seven and going, "Hey, I
yeah,
got the
yeah.
gold star,"
That's right.
So,
That's right. And I appreciate you letting me kind of rant about that. I could say, if I could, a few personal suggestions or examples. Yeah, making it real. So, to summarize a lot of stuff, I think there are three things basically we can do in life again and again and again: deal with the bad, turn to the good, take in the good again and again and again. And in the turning to the good and the taking in the good, we become more effective at dealing with the bad. All three are necessary. There's no spiritual bypass in the saying here. There's no positive thinking here. On the other hand, we have an amazing capacity to turn to the good and take it in. In other words, what's true alongside what's crummy. Let's say a person is practicing social distancing, helping themselves, helping others in a time of a plague, good old-fashioned word spreading through us. We know about plagues. Plagues, are noted in the Old Testament of the Bible, really. Plagues, we get it. So it's a crummy situation in a lot of ways. What can a person do? Well, a person can deal with the bad. They can take cautious steps. They can be prudent. They can grapple with the financial impact. They can do the best they can for loved ones, deal with the bad, while at the same time, they can recognize that alongside what's problematic, there are so many people who are trying to help. Takes me back to, Mr. Rogers quoting his mother saying, "Look for the helpers." So many people, frontline responders, etc., trying to help. Also, meanwhile, children are laughing. Flowers are blooming. Coffee tastes good. I'm drinking some today, right? You're a nice person. I can tell, right? I don't know you super well, and it's a good thing. Here we are talking about important stuff. The things around me work. There are still good things that are true, including inside our own heart. Turn to the good and take in the good. It's really important to stay with beneficial experiences for a breath or longer to help them hardwire into your own brain. Otherwise, they wash on through while the negative experiences are caught because of the brain's negativity bias. So, any moment of any experience or time of sort of anxiety or stress, irritation, exasperation, feeling inadequate, feeling blue, gets sucked right in, goes right in, bingo. On the other hand, moments of feeling gritty, strong, confident, loved, capable, getting stuff done, connected with others, looking out the window and seeing the jasmine blooming as I am right now, that tends to wash right through the brain. So it's very important to take in the good, to slow it down for a breath or longer. There's a famous saying, neurons that fire together wire together. So you want to keep the neurons firing together second after second so they wire together as well. It also helps to feel it in your body and focus on what's rewarding about it, what's enjoyable or meaningful about the experience, which also tends to turbocharge what's called neuroplasticity. That's a fancy term. I focus on positive neuroplasticity, hardwiring more and more inner strengths inside yourself. So that's an example of the current moment, right?
oh my gosh, isn't it? I mean, seriously, if you look at everything people are going through right now, it's the anxiety, stress, feeling insecure, because there's really, most people, there's no idea what's going to happen in the future. So we look at all this, and that uncertainty breeds all these things.
Yeah,
But,
that's right.
it's interesting because you get people who say, well, I'm tough because I have gone through all these negative things, without really realizing that that's what they're hardwiring in their brain.
Oh, wow, that's so true. I mean, there are things that we only learn through, I'll call it pain. The only way to get that gain is through the pain. for example. And I think one thing that's happening broadly, this is June, we're talking in America, there's a lot of pain and a reckoning with, structural racism in our country for a long time now. And there is, I think, a kind of, I'm hopeful that there will be a gain, there will be a change systemically that's, sourced in some ways by a facing of that pain. All right. And there are many other examples. I don't want to be political here. Just in your own personal life, I've myself had loss, have had pain in family. I've done a lot of things in wilderness that were very scary and hard, a lot of rock climbing. There's growth there. On the other hand, I think people overvalue pain. There's this strange professional Grinch industry of people who are grumpy and grouchy. And if you're not miserable, you're not really paying attention, or you're not working hard enough. You're not really taking it for the team. And the truth is, most pain has no gain. It's just pain. If pain had so much gain, wouldn't we want to take other people's pain? No, I got enough pain, thanks. And pain tends to tear us down. Stress wears people down. Brief episodes of stress. The jokey saying is most episodes of stress in the wild end quickly, one way or another. Right? But human stress is chronic. We're stuck with it. We're not designed to marinate in that kind of feeling of just day-to-day mild to moderate stress. It's bad for us. It wears us down. And meanwhile, most of our gains, most of our development of traits of fill in the blank, self-worth, positive mood, feeling securely attached to others, feeling loved by others, becoming more skillful, deep inner insight, acquisition of wisdom, you name it. Most of those positive traits we gain are acquired through experiences of them, which get hardwired into the brain. And those experiences of the good stuff we want to grow are usually enjoyable. They're not painful. They're pleasurable. Their enjoyability is an indicator of their value. They feel good. Mother Nature has made them feel good because they are good for us. And I think it's really a breakthrough for a lot of people to realize that they're overvaluing and marinating in their resentments and regrets and irritations and anxieties and frustrations. It's not good for you. And you won't grow from it. On the other hand, a lot of people undervalue the incredible power of appreciating genuinely good facts around them and slowing it down to recognize it and feel it and internalize it, including good facts about your own character, your own moxie, your own capacity to endure a hard time. The fundamentally good intentions in your heart, even if you don't always live from them, including me. These are things to recognize as well. And then in recognizing them, it's like you're fueling yourself. And the more the world is letting you down, right? The more the world is not helping, the more the world is oppressing you, the more, crud you're dealing with every day, the more important it is to do what we're talking about. Deal with the bad and turn to the good and take in the good, to develop stuff inside yourself. These topics could be framed as, oh yeah, that's for yuppies at yoga camp. But, actually it's for people dealing with the hardest stuff of all, in the streets, in the hospitals, on the farms, just in the hardest situations of all. My family, my father's side, comes from a ranch in North Dakota. He was born there in 1918 and went through the Great Depression and all the rest of it. People deal with hard things. The harder the things are, the more important it is to turn to what's good and useful, to develop strengths inside yourself to deal with it.
I think that's so empowering because everyone goes through kind of like their dark night of the soul within their lifetime, regardless if it's a death. We're going through a very unique time in human history.
Yeah.
It could be many things. And to be able to have a skill set, a new skill set that you can take with you your entire life and use it to navigate all this, I think is so empowering.
Oh, that's really true. I'm thinking about your own career just a teeny bit. I know about half of a sentence worth about it. I know you had a transition in it. And I just think about what we muster to deal with transitions. I don't know, maybe you could comment on that yourself, but what are some of the inner strengths we draw upon when we make, a transition, when we go through any kind of a change? We went through a very recent change ourselves. Our son had been living with us, adult son, for quite a while. When the plague came through America, we're still in it. He wanted to move out after about a month or two in because he was having no life at all. He hadn't seen his girlfriend for a long time, and so he moved out. That was a real loss to just look at our son and think, it's going to be a while before we hug you again, on the one hand. On the other hand, our daughter got COVID in New York City, lived there for a while, got through it, got to the other side, positive antibody test. She definitely had it. So as best we can tell, she's relatively now immune. So she's come to live with us. We've had to manage that kind of transition too. And so people, draw on inner strengths of different kinds to deal with these things. And, to me, I'm just a methods guy, just in the trenches, thinking that, we get through the long and twisty road of life by what's mainly inside us. And I think at a time like the current pandemic, we're faced to reckon with whether we've invested inside ourselves. Because while the music's playing and the sun is shining and everything's going well, we get propped up by our interactions, our activities, our settings, and the experiences we have in them. Okay. So as long as the music is playing, right, we don't need to really develop much inside. You don't have to save for a rainy day. But when the storm finally comes, think of this epidemic as like a slow motion hurricane that we saw long offshore early January, is now sweeping through the country. It's going to be with us probably for another 6 months at least, with consequences for another year or so, at least, ballpark. And in the midst of the storm, you're really left with what you've got inside. Everything else falls apart. And what is there inside? Is there patience inside? Is there calm? Is there an inner peace? Is there an unconditional contentment, not based on conditions? Deep down inside, do you feel at ease and happy with your life and its meaning and its fulfillment? I mean, do you feel that or not? Is there resilience inside? Is there steadiness of mind? Is there lovingness of heart? Can you stay in the present and not get obsessed about the past or the future, right? So there's a reckoning. And with that reckoning, I think, is a great teaching. Yeah, it's time to invest in ourselves. Much like I think it's time clearly to invest in the common good and to really appreciate that if you don't invest in the common good, whether it's public health or science or respect for journalists and respect for the truth altogether, you're going to be in big, big trouble. You can get away with it for a while if you get lucky as a country, but sooner or later there will be a reckoning, and then, boom, there you are. And we're in that reckoning right now.
Well, it's really interesting because you're so right. I mean, this time that we have where we're quarantined, it's like it's begging us to dive inward and look at all the things that we've kind of shoved in closets and hidden and, stuffed and not dealt with.
Yeah.
So, when you're just by yourself, you have yourself to contend with.
Yeah.
And how much do you like yourself?
That's right. And then what can you do to like yourself more, right? And just on that point, if I could, to get practical here, just a couple practical things people can do, because I know we'll be finishing up pretty soon. One practical thing people can do is to deliberately look for little moments with other people when they are actually being cared about in one of 5 basic ways. And I'll just name them. They kind of go from very simple to the ultimate. So we can look for ways in which we are included or seen or appreciated or liked or loved. And when it's real, especially if, like me, you landed in adulthood with a huge hole in your heart of unmet needs, really, unfulfilled longings for appreciation and closeness and inclusion with others. I was a very shy, dorky kid whose parents were loving but poor at empathy, who also was very young going through school, in my case. And so I had a lot of experiences of being an outsider and unseen and unwanted. So there you are. So that's something people can do. Look for those authentic experiences where you're part of a group, you're included, where someone's listening to you or at least trying to understand. Maybe they're appreciating you, they're grateful to you, liked, loved. That's a practice. That's a really good practice. And honestly, bit by bit, you really can internalize it again and again. And over time, feel that you are actually lovable, that you are worthy. And in the process of that, support the capacity to like yourself.
I think I have time for one more question here.
That's great.
But we're gonna have to spend more time with you another day when we can just sit down and really dive into this. So I know you mentioned gratitude. So how much a part does gratitude play in all of this?
Well, all this, of course, is the whole practice of developing the strengths inside that would really help you these days. It sounds fancy, but it's really simple. When I think about my marriage, when I think about my work, when I think about the current moment, when I think about aging, right? How weird. I'm in my 60s. What? How did that happen? Where have I been? So it's really useful to just ask yourself, okay, what if it were more present in my mind these days would really help? What qualities would really help? And then how can I develop them? And absolutely, one of the preeminent qualities supported by vast amounts of research is gratitude, thankfulness for what you've received. Gratitude draws us into a sense of vulnerability. It makes us recognize our dependencies on everything else because we are grateful for gifts. We are not grateful for a paycheck. We're glad we get a paycheck. We're thank them. Yeah, thanks for giving me my paycheck. But it's not so much we're grateful for it. But when a friend goes out of their way to recognize something good in you or just helps you in some simple way, or you realize, wow, the food on my plate is the result of so many people and so many factors reaching back into 10,000 years of history, the domestication of agriculture and all the rest of that. Thank you. Okay, so gratitude draws you into that, and it helps you feel buoyed by life. It helps you feel appreciative of what's also good amidst all the crud. It's not about papering over the bad. It's about appreciating what is also true alongside it, and gratitude really helps in that way. So I think for people, it's really great to just try to develop a general attitude of gratitude. And one way into that is to take a formal practice of doing that. Like at least one meal a day. Slow down for a breath to appreciate all the things that happened to put that tomato on your plate, right? Including maybe the people who helped to make your meal. Or maybe just before bed. This is a classic method, the 3 blessings exercise. Think of 3 things that you're grateful for. Blessings in your life. You don't have to frame it in a religious way if you don't want to. That too will help you a lot. And plus, it's really sweet to do that just before sleep because you're particularly receptive in your brain for what you're experiencing just before sleep. So yeah, gratitude. Gratitude is, honestly, a lot of the time I just feel awestruck with gratitude, gobsmacked with gratitude. Kind of stunned, like a kid. A little kid is grateful as they move through their day. Like, what paper clips? What glazed donuts? Whoa, lint under the bed. Wow. There's a saying: beginner's mind, Zen mind, and you can develop more of that beginner's mind, and thus maybe a Zen mind through practices of gratitude.
It just leaves the world in such a beautiful place when we're there. Excuse me. So, Dr. Hanson, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and, of course, learn about all of your books and the work that you do?
Well, that's kind. Thank you for that question. So they could do that through rickhanson.net. That's the best way to do it. Simply go to my website or Google my name, Rick Hanson, S-O-N. And then you can see all kinds of freely offered resources there, talks, videos, programs. There's all kinds of good stuff there, rickhanson.net.
Well, Dr. Hanson, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Marianne, it was a pleasure. You're great at this.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Dr. Hanson. Coming from you, that's such high praise. We're going to have to do this again sometime soon. If you'd like to connect with Dr. Hanson, you can at his website, rickhanson.net, for more information on all of his books. He has a podcast as well. You want to check that out. I listen to it. And make sure to be part of his community. Also, Neurodharma is available there, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. You'll want to stay tuned for our next special guest, Dr. Laurel Mellin, and she's here to share with us her new book, What's My Number? One simple question that unlocks your brain's power for health, happiness, and purpose. We are going to pause here for a quick break. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with our next special guest, Dr. Laurel Mellin, and she's here to share with us her new book, What's My Number? One simple question that unlocks your brain's power for health, happiness, and purpose. So Dr. Laurel Mellin is the founder of Emotional Brain Training, otherwise known as EBT, a neuroscience-based solution to stress. She is a health psychologist and associate clinical professor of family and community medicine and pediatrics at the School of Medicine, University of California, San Francisco. Dr. Mellin is a New York Times bestselling author, researcher, speaker, and clinical trainer. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Laurel Mellin.
Oh, what a pleasure to be here with you, Marianne.
You know, gosh, what a great time for this book. I know What's My Number really dives into so much that we really need right now.
Well, you know, we have another body part that we mostly don't even think about. It's in the brain, and it's the emotional brain, and it's amazingly competent, and it's the stress brain. So in times long past now, we didn't have as much stress and we could get by with thinking and doing, but it's now the age of the emotional brain, and we're learning how to work with our emotional brain to be amazingly resilient.
So what inspired you to write this book? Why this time?
Well, you know, I've written many books on emotional brain training because clinicians use it, the public uses it for everything from depression and anxiety to overeating and relationship issues or stomach aches or anything that's stress related. But what I decided is we needed a little book that everyone could pick up, they can put in their backpack, and it just gives them the real facts they need to know to get competent with the tools of EBT so they can shut off cravings and those stuck states that come. And it was really just almost like PPG. You know, everybody needs the basic protection against stress. And I thought, wow, a little book like 140 pages or something where people could just pick it up and run with it. And we had so many requests from it. In fact, some of our participants, one in particular says, Laurel, I've been waiting for 20 years for you to write this simple book on EBT. So we just felt that right now, as a public health measure, everyone needs these tools. And the reason for that, Marianne, is that in the past, we've used 2 of our resiliency pathways. The brain actually has 5 levels of stress. One is the least stress, and the top of our brain's in charge, all the way down to stress overload, which is most of what we're experiencing right now, where the reptilian brain is in charge. That's stress level 5, so 1 to 5. Now, you can think your way to feeling good or great at the low stress levels 1 or 2, but research in neuroscience is really, really clear that after 2, a different kind of experience happens, one of stress overload. Pardon me. And what that means is that if you don't have emotional tools to process that stress, the emotions get stuck. They become anxiety, depression, hostility, irritability, you know, the regular stuff that goes on, numbness, or just being busy, kind of a stress high. In those states of stuck emotions, we eat, drink, spend, get stalled in our work, get upset in relationships. And that's where most of human suffering occurs, at stress levels 3, 4, and 5. So imagine, here we have a culture where not just 20 or 40% of people are in stress overload, but 70 to 90% of people. And we know for sure that the old cognitive, behavioral, analytical tools that work absolutely great when we're at brain state or stress level 1 or 2 are useless at 3, 4, and 5, which is what's happening in people's lives. That's why we want a public health initiative that everyone should have this. It should be in schools and in churches and in temples and in communities and in families, because no one can really afford to be stuck in stress right now. We need everybody to be functional and trying to move our country back toward peace and power and health.
So you've brought up EBT a couple of times. Why don't you share with our listeners what that is?
Emotional brain training is a method of controlling what we thought in the past, what Freud said was uncontrollable, which is we have an unconscious mind. So here, right behind the forehead, right, if you put your hand on your forehead, that's your thinking brain or your prefrontal cortex. And that's the center of personal control. And that's why we've used thinking so much. But what that thinking brain's first job is actually to control the unconscious mind, the emotional brain, which is basically between the ears. And those are all of our wires of how we respond reflexively, automatically in daily life, particularly during stress. So what we've been doing with our thinking brain in the past is we've been saying we can't really control our emotions. We can't control a lot of those things. Maybe with our behaviors, we can think our way through them. And so we began to be mindful and change our thoughts and change our behaviors. But with EBT, the discovery of EBT, which was about 10 years ago, we identified a very, very simple way that anyone, whether you're a child, adolescent, adult, or older person, can actually use a simple 5-point system to identify their level of stress in their emotional brain. This is control central for health, happiness, productivity, and sense of purpose, and also spirituality. If you know your number, that's why it's called What's My Number? It's also a stress vaccine, essentially, because it can protect you. Once you know your number, you just use a very simple emotional tool, and you spiral up back to a state of feeling good or great in 2 to 4 minutes. It's very fast. So you get unstuck from stress. All of a sudden you say, wow, I really like who I am. This is emotional brain training. And this little simple system, What's My Number? This stress vaccine allows people to stop the cascade of stress hormones from making them sick and depressed and anxious and hungry and overwhelmed. So it's a defense mechanism, but this is the amazing part, Marianne. And I've been working on this method for 40 years, but just in the last 10 years, we have had the science to show that if you care about yourself, if you say, I care about my stress level. I care about my quality of life. I'm going to make checking my number, my stress number, my first priority, using the tools and spiraling up out of that stuck state and all that suffering. And when I do that, I not only feel better in the moment, but something else magical occurs. And that's the power of positive emotional neuroplasticity. The brain starts to change. It starts to naturally spiral up from stress. It gets those pathways of resiliency really strong, so they start to work on their own, so we don't have to do all the work ourselves. So essentially, what we do now to process stress with emotional brain training also rewires early childhood wounds, later trauma, PTSD, depression, moments where you just were in stress overload and had something really horrible. We've all had that in our lives. You can clear up the circuits in the brain using the same exact tools. So it's really the future of healthcare.
So it seems like we're in this period of time where stress is on overload for a lot of people, especially if we look at children and aging adults. Can this be used for any age?
You know what's so interesting, Marianne, is that in our thinking brain, we're also different. If you walk down the street and you just essentially downloaded the thoughts from 20 different people, they'd be completely different. In other words, we all think about things differently. Our thinking brain is very, very diverse. When it comes to the fundamental brain, which is the emotional brain that's there to help us survive and thrive and be rewarded and connect with other people, we're exactly the same. The same 5 tools works for everyone. And parents are not only using What's My Number, EBT, to essentially take care of their own stress so they can be good parents. They can go to work and get stuff done instead of essentially getting stalled or stuck or overloaded. But they're actually teaching their children this. So children, adolescents, and young adults are particularly stressed right now. And also older people. My mother, who died when she was 87, used EBT because she was stressed and she had sleep problems. And she said, I don't want to take all those medications. There's too many side effects. And so she'd use these tools. So really, we've taught people up through age 100 because when it comes to the emotional brain, we're all the same pathways and the same processes. So it really simplifies it a lot.
That's so encouraging to hear that because, it's something that can help anybody, regardless where they're at on their path. So it has me asking so if someone is in a position where they are highly stressed out, what are some tips or tools they can use to identify what level they are and then kind of work through that?
Wonderful. Well, the first part is really, really helpful, which is when we're in stress overload, sometimes we don't know it because some people go numb and they think they're fine. Other people go on kind of a high, a false high. Everything's fine when it's not. And the people like me who go low when they're stressed, they know it because you feel anxious, or for me, I feel depressed. So one thing is knowing whether you're stressed or not, but it's very disorienting to be in stress overload. And what the human brain does is we blame ourselves. We think there's something wrong with us, and we think that everybody else has it together, and it's just us. We're the ones who can't process our feelings or process our stress. So the most important thing is don't analyze your feelings. Don't say, why am I feeling stressed? Why am I upset? Because essentially, you're not going to be thinking well when you're in stress. So let me give you this little tip. There's 5 levels of stress in the brain, as I mentioned. When you are at 1, you feel present and aware, and you have a slight glow in your body. That's because the reward centers are being activated, and we not only need to be safe and low stress, but we need to feel rewarded. So that brain state 1 is what we're shooting for with all of these tools. In fact, that's how it works. Brain state 2, you're feeling present, but there's no glow. You're not inspired. And then it goes downhill. Now, in those first 2 levels of stress, 1 and 2, you can think pretty well and you can cope. But once you get into 3, 4, and 5, a completely different kind of circuit in the brain, a stress overload circuit takes over. So these emotions get stuck and they're stuck on. And when that happens, you really can't think well. The thinking brain goes out to lunch. And so if you decide to start thinking your way through feelings, what you're going to do is ruminate, awfulize, blame yourself, be sure that you have every diagnosis in the book, and get stalled and stuck. So first, just identify your stress number. 3 is is a little stressed. 4 is definitely stressed. You really feel it in your body. You know that you're in pain or agony, or you feel bad inside. And 5 is totally overloaded and overwhelmed. Now, most of us in this nation right now are running at 4 or 5. And so this one tip, I think, can really help everyone a lot. When you're in stress, ask yourself, what's my number? Even if you don't know these tools, if you're at 3, 4, or 5, say, what do I really need? And what I need to do is process my emotions and get back to 1 or 2, where my thinking brain is really smart. And I'm really able to figure things out instead of just imploding and getting into a downward spiral.
That is so important and such great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it helps people to come to this place where they're like, okay, I can be in charge of my stress and not have my stress run rampant.
Exactly. And those states of 3, 4, and 5, those states are stuck on. So if you wonder, why did I get triggered and then I couldn't get out of it? It's not you. It's not your fault. It's the kind of wire that we all have. It's a toxic stress overload wire. Everyone on the planet has them, and they have no shutoff valves. So once you get triggered, you could be in stress, even though you're not aware of it, with all those chemicals gushing that create these health problems for a half an hour to 5 days. You can even be stressed out. So the benefit of emotional brain training, the What's My Number, this stress vaccine, is that you cut into that stress in the present moment in 2 to 4 minutes. So you stop that gushing of stress chemicals. And that's what we want to do. We want our nation is having some challenges and a lot of changes that are going on in the next few years and a lot of opportunities. We have a lot of opportunities to become a better nation, a healthier nation, a happier nation. But if we don't give our population, that means our families, our mothers and fathers and grandmothers and employers and employees, the tools of emotional brain training, people are going to get in 3, 4, and 5, and they're going to start blaming themselves. They'll start noticing that they have appetites and they're not thinking well and they're not really doing the kind of job they need. So that's why that's the number one priority of our nation right now, Marianne, to update how we approach stress, to get real about it. We've been actually stressed since 1990. It's been going up. And because I'm a professor of medicine, I really follow the medical aspect of this. In other words, all the rates of the various conditions from diabetes and anxiety and depression and addiction and all these common problems, even heart disease and cancer, are rooted in chronic stress. They've all been really hard to treat, and the rates have been going up, and we've been ignoring it. We've been ignoring the stress catastrophe we have. But with the last year, the last few months in particular, and going forward, everyone is stressed out and everyone is ready for a reset so they can be highly effective in shutting off those stress chemicals so they can think well and feel better and have that vibrancy that we all need to live happier, healthier, more purposeful lives. And that's why I'm so passionate about bringing this book, What's My Number, this stress vaccine book, to everyone, because we can, as a culture, if we update how we process stress so we're functioning at our best, we can actually use the changes of the last few months to our benefit. We can construct a new approach to how we live our lives that's going to be more loving, healthier, and more able to be honest about what's going on in our lives. We don't have to cover up our stress. We can just move through it.
Well, I understand we were talking a little bit before we got started here today that your book, What's My Numbers, actually, there's so much new data that you've collected that you have a re-release coming up, right?
We do have a re-release coming up very shortly in a week or so. The book has actually been elevated so that we know that more hospitals and employers and organizations are going to want to quantity order it because we absolutely must have a stress update in the lives of our population. And so we call it now the Stress Vaccine, a solution to the crisis in emotional health. It has more statistics in it. It has more examples of how to use these tools and more inspiration of how you can help our nation and the world by your personal choice to move to what's my number, in other words, emotional brain training, and switch off that stress and switch on these beautiful resiliency pathways that are natural in the brain that activate those healthy chemicals so that we can be part of the solution that we really need right now.
So why, if we're just thinking positive thoughts, why doesn't that help? Or just being mindfully aware?
What a great thought on that. Well, it does work when you're at 1 and 2. When you're at low stress, 1 and 2, you can be mindfully aware, you can think positive thoughts, and that's actually a problem because when you're at 1 or 2, the brain shuts off and it tells you you're not going to be at 3, 4, or 5 again, that this is reality, 1 or 2, and these tools absolutely work. If I'm mindfully aware, in fact, we've incorporated mindfulness into emotional brain training because you've got to be mindfully aware. It's just that you also need to activate emotional tools to switch off the stress too. So it's a combination. But what happens is at 3, 4, or 5, the thinking brain, that's the prefrontal cortex, which is our only hope for personal control behind our forehead, that actually goes offline. So if thinking and awareness is what you're depending upon, not emotional processing, the thinking brain offline means those processes are not going to work. And there's been studies conducted at New York University that showed that it was so frustrating. In fact, this one researcher said, my gosh, it looks like these other methods, these cognitive awareness, mindfulness methods should work against these high stress problems. But all these high stress diseases are going up to the moon. The prevalence of them is raising right when we've been using these cognitive approaches. And so they did a study, and they showed exactly what I'm saying to you, is that they work great at 1 and 2, and at 3, they don't work at all. And then we go down that toxic path to chronic stress, and who do we blame but ourselves? And we really need one thing, the emotional tools to switch off stress and get back to that state. And then when you're back to that state, or 1 or 2, the positive thinking works, the mindfulness works, and so you've got the best of both worlds.
That's so important. I had no idea that the brain really functioned in that way. I think most people have no idea. So having this information really puts you in the driver's seat of managing your own anxiety, your own stress, and really your life.
Well, and the part of it has to do with love and compassion and judgment, because we are just, emotional creatures. What we want more than anything is love. We need to love ourselves. We need to love life. We need to love others. And what happens when we don't understand our emotional brain, when we don't have these 5 tools, is that when we get to 3, 4, and 5, the cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which is an ugly hormone when it's stuck on, because it's all about judgments. It's fight, flight. It's harsh. We either turn that aggression in toward ourselves or outside to others. And many people just turn it inside with self-blame. And now that the world has emotional brain training, EBT, what happens is, it's really about your emotional brain and the kinds of wires that are in it. So, like, for example, last night, I was watching something on television. It was very disturbing to me. And I went right down to a brain state 5. And I said to my husband, I said, oh, sweetheart, I'm at 5. I'm feeling overwhelmed, lost, and confused. And he said, hey, and I'm at 4. I'm a little bit less stressed, but I'm still feeling pretty down. And we looked at each other. There was no judgment. It was, well, it's normal to be in all 5 brain states in any given day. It's just that we don't want to get stuck there. So we had a language to communicate it. And secondly, these wires of how we respond to life, most of them come from our childhood or encoded later during stress overload. So they're not our fault. They're just wires. And with an EBT, you can actually choose a wire. Like I used to have a wire that was an overeating wire. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to become a nutritionist. Before I became a health psychologist, I was a nutritionist, and I'm going to fix my overeating by learning about food. Well, actually, it was a wire in my brain that had been encoded early in life that made me triggered to overeat. And once I had the emotional tools to switch off the cravings, the same tools allowed me to break that wire, so I stopped that overeating. So whatever pattern we're in that we feel out of control, truly on a neuroscience level, it's really just an emotional wire. And now everyone can have the skills to shut off those wires, stop the judgment, and have a better quality of life.
So when we look at all this, can it help change bad habits that we've had forever? I know you've mentioned overeating and a few other things, but is this something that can also help with like unhealthy lifestyles altogether?
Absolutely. And so many of us are quick to blame ourselves. We say, I don't feel like getting up off the couch. I'm just too lazy. Or they might say, this drinking problem, I'm beyond any hope. Or what about my overspending? Or my favorite, buying books on Amazon. So whatever it is, you're going to have habits that are really hard to change. Now, if it's an easy habit to change, it's because it's stored at levels 1 and 2 in your stress brain. But anything that's difficult, it's stored in the bottom parts of the brain, in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th stress area. And those wires are so lickety-split that they get activated without our permission or control. So with emotional brain training, you just decide, okay, let's say my problem is I procrastinate with work, or my problem is I really won't get up the couch, or I really do use too many medications, or whatever that is. You just say, it's actually a wire in the brain. And to be more specific, what that wire is this. Is that, like, I'll use my eating as a problem because it doesn't matter. You can get stuck in a mood, like being in a rage. You can get stuck in a behavior. You can get stuck in a relationship pattern where you're always pleasing other people or always trying to rescue other people. Whatever that is, in the brain, it's one thing, Marianne. It's a brain glitch. It's sometime in your life you were really stressed out. Like I was about 11. I was really stressed out. I'd been bullied at school. And I reached for cinnamon rolls, and my brain had a false connection between fight or flight stress, really feeling overwhelmed, and sugar. And once that circuit gets encoded, what's strange about the brain is it holds onto that circuit, and then even small daily stresses activate a fight or flight drive for that pattern, whether it's a stuck mood, whether it's procrastination, whether it's overeating. And that's going to be there for the rest of your life. The only way you can rewire it, you can't think your way out of it, is to activate the circuit, which we teach you how to do in emotional brain training. Everyone should know how to activate these circuits and change them. And once you activate them, you use an emotional tool, and it stops the circuit from the association. It breaks that connection. Once the connection in the brain is changed so that I'm not craving food all the time, I can be sensible about food, and I can go back up to brain state 1 or 2 and learn how to be mindful about my food, learn what I should eat, and I'll be able to do it. So if you have a habit or a pattern that you can't break, please don't blame yourself. Instead, appreciate it's in the emotional brain. We didn't have the technology, the self-care tips that enabled people to switch those patterns in the past. Now we do. You don't have to live with those patterns. You can rewire them. The tools are simple, and anyone can learn them.
That's just so empowering. Why is it that this works so quickly? Is there a reason to that?
Yeah, it is. And, one of the things that shows that this works quickly is many therapists have been in therapy sessions, and they notice that sometimes they say or do something to a client, and all of a sudden it rocks their world. All of a sudden they change. And you can probably think of times in your own life where you worked at something, all of a sudden something changed, and it was stopped being an issue in your life. It was just over. And the reason for that is the wires in the emotional brain change only with emotional experience. So as long as we're analyzing ourselves, making lists, trying to figure things out, we block our emotions, we suppress our emotions, and we block change. In a moment, with actually activating a wire that's emotional, that you can actually bring up, feel the feelings in the moment, and choose a different path, the brain updates how it responds to life, and you change your brain so the drive for it begins to fade. Now, sometimes, even with emotional brain training, when you come into the program, you get an app, so you don't have to think about it. You can just use the emotional tools. And then people, after using those emotional tools for maybe a few weeks, they say, hey, I want more. I want to get at my depression circuit, or I want to get at my anxiety circuit, or why am I always pleasing my wife circuit, or whatever that is. And they learn how to rewire a circuit. A basic life skill. It should be taught in school. It should be taught everywhere. And so they actually learn how to activate the circuit and shut it off. Sometimes it works in one hit. Other times it takes a number of hits. But the emotional process is the same. And sometimes you get lucky and it just ends right there. More often you sort of hit away at it. You chip away at it several times or many times until all of a sudden you are free. And that's the difference with emotional brain training. You don't force yourself to change a habit. You rewire your brain so the drive stops. So you can use your normal wisdom and sensibility, and it's not hard to change. In fact, one of the frustrations I had in EBT was that participants we have telegroups, so people can get these skills over the telephone because they want privacy and they want to just do it in an easy way given they're so busy. So in a telegroup, we would have people coming in and they would say, they worked on their food circuit, for example, their food wire that made them overeat, or their numbing out circuit. And then it would be like a couple months later and they're working on some other circuit and they'd say to me, "Oh, Laurel, I've lost 15 pounds. I said, "You didn't mention that." And they said, "Well, it wasn't an issue. After I rewired the circuit, food was not an issue in my life. It wasn't that interesting to me." And the same for the mood. So in other words, when you go to the source of our power in life, which is our emotional brain, and learn how to change it, the problems begin to fade because the brain has changed. This is the easy way to change, by changing the wires that activate the stress that causes us to do what we keep doing over and over again. And it just shocked me. I said, "So you mean I helped you learn that skill, you learned it, and then you went on to something else?" And that's exactly what happens, is we're free of that drive. So what we want to do is go on to the next thing. Maybe we're going to learn how to improve our relationships or another way of working style. So the mind wants to go on to doing something new and wonderful when they've already satisfied that other drive, and it's history. It's like a love affair that's over. It's done.
That is so empowering, Laurel, and I can't wait for the new book to come out and read that as well. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn about your books?
Thank you so much. Actually, it's emotional brain training, and the website is EBT. It's like food stamps. So you've got to wade through the food stamp lines in the internet, but it's ebt.org, and there's all the science, all the books. There's a community. There's what we really love, which is the app, so people can get started right away and start enjoying that. And also 30-day daily groups where in 30 days you can reset your brain for stress resilience, and weekly groups and workshops and tapes. We want everyone to have these tools as a national effort to move past this stress overload that we're all experiencing so we can move forward with more joy and productivity and be healthier and happier. That's what we need most right now.
Oh, isn't that the truth? I mean, I felt that What's My Number was such a powerful little book, and it's really simple. It's easy for people to get in and start reading. And I felt it was such a great resource. I can't wait to see the next one. Laurel.
Thank you.
No, thank you. And thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
What a pleasure for me. Thank you, Marianne.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mellin. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you. And of course, to talk about your new book, What's My Number? What's My Number is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and of course, you can get it on Kindle. If you'd like to connect with Dr. Mellin, you can at ebt.org for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.